I would just love people to think really, really about the why of what they're doing in road safety and explaining that first before we talk about the what and the how. How do you really explain to someone why something needs to happen and work back from there? The what and the how, we know pretty much, but it's the why that I think is holding road safety back currently. And I think if we spent more time thinking about the why of what we're doing for every single countermeasure, I think that we would be in a better spot to be able to influence and take action.
G'day and welcome to the Transport Leaders Podcast. I'm Graham McCabe. I'm a transport planner and traffic engineer with 30 years experience working in Australia and the Asia Pacific.
Hello, I'm Russell King. I'm the founder of the Transport Leader newsletter and blog, and I've got 20 years experience doing transport policy.
Okay, Russell, what are we going to talk about today?
Today, Graham, we're going to carry on our series on road safety, and today our particular focus is on going from road safety strategy to actual implementation and actually getting the results that we need to see on our roads.
Well, that's not you and me, so I think we need to bring in our special guests. Everybody welcome Claire Campbell. Claire is the founder and director of Claire Campbell Consulting, and she's got a deep history in road safety policy. So Claire, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself for the audience?
Thanks, Gus, and wonderful to be here today. So I spent, I want to say 20, but it's probably 25 years working in government in road safety, and a particular sort of niche that I have really enjoyed working in is narrative-driven policy reform. So I have done all sorts of things like the world first mobile phone detection camera program, spent a large amount of time doing strategy development and action planning, and working at the intersection of sort of the bureaucracy and politics. So a great career.
Wow, that's really interesting. But before we get on to the formal questions, I just want to ask you to explain the mobile phone detection camera system, because in some parts of the world, and I'm thinking the US and parts of Canada, using cameras to actually look into people's cars to see what they're doing would probably cause riots. So do you want to describe the policy and technology associated with that?
Yeah, sure. So it was a really interesting one in that this was something that came by industry approaching ministers and saying that there was this sort of technology out there that existed, and to address the mobile phone issue, which was a very hot topic and is actually a road safety risk. So the then minister at the time, the Honourable Melinda Pavey, was approached by industry, as I said, to try and test this technology to see if it actually worked. That was the mandate at the time for government to investigate that in New South Wales, and it was really unproven. We pretty much broke the mould of everything that we've ever done in terms of testing technology. But a large part of that, yes, we had to do the technology testing, but as you mentioned, Graham, it was really about understanding the privacy issues that we had to deal with. And so there was a lot of briefing of the New South Wales Privacy Commissioner at the time, which was really interesting in itself to actually go through that process of briefing them to make sure that the technology was actually sound at what it was sort of doing. As we were running that sort of information and briefing with the Privacy Commissioner, the technology was actually testing, well, what actually can you see inside the vehicle?
Yeah. Okay. And that's all it's all processed by algorithm and then checked by people. That's right, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. Like the
Yeah.
technology is actually still eyeballed by a human. And some people don't actually realize that. So every image, even though it's captured using the technology that it is, it's still eyeballed by an actual person before an infringement's issued.
Okay.
How did you monitor when you were trialing it? What did success look like? What were the sort of the indicators you were looking for? Because I assume you're going for more than just catching someone using the mobile phone when they're not. You're trying to understand its impact downstream on safety.
Yeah, look, it was, well, first of all, we had to make sure the technology worked, right? And we had to be able to check that it was able to pick up the difference between a mobile phone and something else. So we really sort of tested that technology as we went through. The thing is, we knew at scale, and we were seeing this, that police were issuing infringements and could see inside of vehicles, but we needed to actually get a test sort of broader to know that whether or not this technology was going to work. So the critical thing in implementation for this one was actually doing a pilot. When we spoke to the minister, we wanted to test the technology on the road and do a pilot. I think the pilot was for 12 months, but it gave the community and the ministers certainty that what we were doing was actually having a change in behaviour. So that initial trial period was actually really important. And this is transferable to any sort of policy reform that you're looking at. If a minister or an elected official doesn't want to jump straight in, even though there may be mountains of evidence from other jurisdictions, I would say, and I say this to elected officials all the time, do a pilot. What's the harm of doing something at a small scale, either geographically or over a short time period, to actually give confidence and tell the story to the community before you actually go to full rollout. That's one of the biggest lessons in implementation that I think people really need to understand.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And actually, I think when you see lots of studies around good policy making, when you're designing policy, one of the key questions that you should be asking is, what does the implementation rollout look like? And part of that is a pilot required?
Yeah.
And very interestingly as well is there's lots of examples of where pilots have been tried, but they don't scale afterwards. So, they aren't able to hold it. Now, this is different, I think, in this one. I think the challenges are, but in a lot of cases, you find education suffers from this a lot. They try piloting a new educational, initiative in a school or in a series of schools, and they see positive results, and then they roll it out to lots of schools and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And for various reasons, it doesn't scale. But yeah, I completely agree. Considering pilots is an important part of that policy thinking.
Yeah, and if you look at things like infrastructure rollouts, so 2+1 roads, for instance, which are used broadly across Sweden, a very well-known countermeasure where you can essentially use the same sort of road corridor. I won't go into 2+1 roads. Maybe you can put it in the show notes for a link. But those sorts of things, if you can show examples of international jurisdictions doing them and then do them sort of in a couple of places, like the Midlands Highway in Tasmania, classic example where they've implemented that sort of treatment along the length of the road, but it then builds that confidence to explain to people why you're doing that sort of treatment before you then, one, invest a whole lot of money, and two, might get pushback around sort of the cost and funding to do it broad way.
All right. So just taking a step back, is it fair to say that we know what to do to improve road safety, but sometimes governments and at a political and a bureaucratic level struggle to actually make those changes?
Great question. Yes, I think we do know what to do broadly. I used to always say it's follow the leader of jurisdictions, like leading jurisdictions. The most difficult part, though, is actually transacting the change. The evidence is pretty simple. It's how you tell the story. And this is why, I really spend 80% of my time in my work now talking about narrative-driven policy reform. That's what will actually get you to a story. And it's not saying things like 40% of crashes are speed related. Who cares? Do you know what I mean? Like, who cares? What does that mean to a person in a regional area? It doesn't. It's not something that people can really sort of tangibly grasp. And I'll give you a really good example. The Commonwealth consultation recently that was done on reducing the default regional speed limit.
Yeah, so for the non-Australians in the audience, this is the federal government in Australia. We refer to either the federal government or the Commonwealth for various complicated historical reasons. But yes. Sorry, go on, Claire.
So there's a very bureaucratic process of putting out a regulatory impact statement, right? They have to do that, but it was the consultation for how to engage on that could have been done in different ways. And I did a LinkedIn post about this because essentially it went out for consultation. People, sort of the media got a hold of it, advocates who were against it lobbied, and before the consultation was even closed, the sort of intervention or announcement was done, right?
Just to add some context on this, Claire, right, is Australia's not doing very well on road safety in terms of, making progress at the moment. We're going backwards, if anything, at
Yes.
a national level. And disproportionately, our regional areas are disproportionately, we've got worse road safety records. Okay. So in terms of the statistics and the challenges we've got in road safety, that's not disputed at all. The challenge here is about how to take the community with us, isn't it? Really?
Absolutely. And politicians too, and elected officials. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, and it's making it tangible for them. So we can show an image which is a little girl standing on the side of a road going to school with a school bus on a regional road, right? Now, if I was still in government, I would, any politician would be moved by something like that. One, because it's talking about children and people. You look at the interventions that we put in place in school zones. They're the safest part of our network. We'll do it for the kids. Do you know what I mean? People understand that. They can engage in it. But it brings to life a whole lot of things that you can talk to a minister about. You can talk to them about star rating of roads. You can talk to them about vulnerability and why speed limits need to be what they do. It's not just one single thing that we're talking about, but engaging just with the regional limit is not a way to start the conversation, in my view. So there is a picture that I sort of put up. And, people get heaps of engagement when they talk about that because they understand it, like it's tangible for them.
Yeah, I mean, we've got lots of history and ongoing proof around how providing people with the dry statistics around road safety doesn't work. And even when we have horrible tragedies, children dying outside of a school or something, there's a kind of, oh, it's terrible, isn't it? But there's a kind of discounting of the fact that it's considered to be a tragic accident rather than something that we actually could have prevented, but with, different policies.
That's right. And if you look, one of the things when we really started talking about telling the story, the New South Wales Road Safety Plan 2021, so there's a cover page, there's a minister's forward, and then the first page that we did was an infographic that said every 43 minutes someone is killed or seriously injured on our roads.
Great stat.
Do you know what I mean? Like that was it. And we called it that's the burning platform, right? Like that's the problem that sets up everything else that's in the document that actually has meat on it. And we can talk about that. That is going to get people engaged and involved in the conversation rather than going 40% of trauma is speed related, and I would never, ever start a conversation with a politician where I led with talking about speeding because even though it's very important, it's so polarizing for some people that it's better to start with things that they feel comfortable with. If you can explain why we have the school zone system and the infrastructure treatments and all the stuff we do in school zones, then they can take that and apply it to sort of the broader network. Does that make sense?
Yeah, one of the things in, talking to politicians is personal experiences, because they're all people focused. That's how they get elected, is by getting to know and understand their community and talking to them. So when you use people focused anecdotes, that gets a message through. But yeah, I completely agree. Saying 40% of our road trauma is caused by speeding. Well, a lot of people in country towns would know somebody who's either been killed or been seriously injured in a road crash, if not directly, at least indirectly, directly through family and friends.
I think definitely. I'm sure every person actually in Australia would have someone that they knew who was impacted by road trauma. There's a great quote that I use just in terms of how you can work with politicians. So a great sort of saying and reference that I use is the same water that boils an egg softens a carrot. So a politician who lives in inner city Melbourne would be motivated by very different things and comes to the table with very different things than, say, a Nationals minister in Queensland, for instance. And so it's finding that purpose. Every time we had a change of minister, I would go and read their introductory speech into Parliament, because you can tell a lot by a minister and what drives them based on what they say in their opening speech. And I would do that as a matter of course. And I would encourage policy people to do that, or anyone working in or near elected officials. Like, what is it that motivates them and how can you work with them?
100%. I would completely echo that.
Yeah.
And get inside their head, understand where they're coming from.
Yeah,
It's a
because
really good idea.
they're human too. And the other thing is, Austroads has really recently done a piece on road safety management, which is it's great that they're actually looking at sort of non-technical things, but in order to improve road safety outcomes, right? Because road safety management is sort of the engine room for how you get interventions done. But we developed, quite often road safety advocates or people working in road safety will say it's all the politicians' fault and that's why things aren't happening and whatever. But we're actually asking them to do a lot. And, sometimes they're not there for a long time. So we ask them to understand what the safe system approach is. We ask them to commit to long-term targets outside of their election cycle. We're asking them for money. We're asking them to front media when there's, serious incident. And we're asking them to collaborate across stakeholders. We're wanting them to understand deterrence theory and why we have RBT and things like drug driving programs. Like, there's a lot of stuff that they need to know.
Yes.
Telling them that, and sort of working through that with them before you then sort of slap something on their desk and say, off you go.
I'd also add on, we're actually asking them to take on a lot psychologically, right? Because every time someone dies on the road, the person who is the most responsible, probably accountable for that, is the minister in charge of road safety. That it's kind of like they are the ones that are supposed to be preventing people from dying on the roads. That's quite a psychological impost on an individual.
Absolutely. I think in my time working inside government, I figured it out at one point, like 10,000 fatal crash reports, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot. Like,
Terrific,
when you're carrying that load, when you work over that period of time and, your day started with the daily running sheet, it's really important. And, you're driven by that when you're working in it. They get that too. So they're seeing it, but it does take that time to build their knowledge. But also, really critically, it's building trust between politics and bureaucracy. Really, that's really important.
So, Claire, what are we getting right then? What are we actually that's actually in our strategies and we're actually able to implement and we're implementing? What are the things we're getting right?
Well, the fact we even have strategies is a big win, right? Because sometimes you look to New Zealand, a country like New Zealand, they had a very clear road safety strategy. They had a change of government and essentially overnight they had no strategy. So the fact that we have strategies is really important. Two, I think we're getting right. People now understand a little more broadly what the safe system approach is. And rather than victim blaming, yes, we still have a lot to do. People understand that there is a system that it's operating in. So that has moved on, I think.
So when you say, Claire, people, who are the people you're thinking about here? Because the average Joe in the street hasn't got a clue what the safe system is. So what do you mean by the people in this space?
The blessed engineers.
Okay.
The blessed engineers.
You mean the Grahams of the world? Those type of people.
Yes, the Grahams of the world, right? So if we had have said 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the road could potentially be the problem, you might get laughed at. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. Like, people would go, oh no, it was the driver's fault. So I think we have definitely got a coalition of the willing of engineers now who even sort of understand that. Years ago, we did a thing in the Roads and Traffic Authority then called mainstreaming road safety, which was really about getting people across the agency to take ownership. And I think the problem when we say road safety is everyone's responsibility, that's something that I now go, it's actually not. Like yes, it is the responsibility of people, like a road user has a responsibility, but there's very clearly assigned responsibility, but also accountability for different people in the system, right? So the minister has totally different responsibilities and accountabilities than a road user, far greater. A head of a transport agency has particular, accountabilities. The head of highway patrol has accountabilities. So the thing of, and now I'm jumping to bad already, but the fact that people do know the safe system approach, I also do think that, and a good example of that is the Man on the Street campaign, which was done originally by the Transport Accident Commission, which showed, I don't know if you know it, you could probably put this in your show notes, but essentially asking a person on the street how many people is an acceptable number of road deaths, right? And he gave a number. That was really saying to people, that was sowing the seed of the fact of the Vision Zero, that it is possible, and it humanised it. And that was used in Victoria and then replicated in New South Wales to create an authorising environment to do things essentially in road safety. It was putting it on the agenda. It was making people see it, including ministers and everyone who was working on the road safety plan at the time. But it made it human for people. So I think we've been very good at doing that sort of thing. Adoption of Vision Zero, again, there's jurisdictions that have walked away from targets and target setting, and safety performance indicators, which are essentially indicators that sit under sort of targets, is something that we've adopted from leading jurisdictions, and we're doing that particularly well too. And I would also, one more, sorry.
This is good. We've got some things that are going well. That's good.
We actually have, compared to other jurisdictions, really actually very, very good data. So I was speaking to people in Canada recently. They don't get their traffic data at their sort of municipal council level until 2 years later. 2 years
gap.
Huge, right?
Not quite real time then, yeah.
No. So like our data and serious injury data is actually very good.
So Claire, those are great sort of...
The detailed data takes a bit of time to actually get out to practitioners.
Yeah. So it sounds like we've got some good foundations, target for Vision Zero, safe system, there's some good foundations there, but we're not making great progress at the moment in Australia, right? So we're not making any progress towards Vision Zero, even though it is the target that I think pretty much everywhere's got now. So what's going wrong? What are we not doing that is problematic?
Well, this is where I will go to speed, really. For all the evidence that we have on speed management and speed enforcement, and we haven't been able to crack that nut. Do you know what I mean? Like that, if we could collectively sort of address and build the case for change in speed management, you would see massive, massive reductions in the road toll. And I mean, it's ironic that currently, we're talking about lowering the speed limit on our highways because of fuel shortages. We've never been able to get it on the agenda when, we're sort of operating BAU. So I think speed is like one that we are really failing at.
So talk us
on that.
When you say speed management, what do you mean by that? What is it that we're actually needing to do in order to do those speeds? Because there's several levers to pull here, isn't it? It's not just one.
When I say speed management, what I mean by that is there's a huge trauma problem, a huge sort of chunk of the trauma problem is in regional urban centres outside of, and this is any jurisdiction, right? So you've got regional centres where you have that combination of pedestrians and vehicles interacting, and the speed limit in those regional urban towns needs to be reduced. So that's one. High-speed regional roads, again, we need to be able to move to sort of speed reduction and speed limit reduction there.
So Claire, just to clarify, the problem here is they're driving within the speed limit at the moment, but it's not. But they're still having the accidents. The speed induced. Is that
No.
right?
So really, and this is where sort of we need to move from, when the 50K default urban speed limit was done, however many years ago now, it was a very much a blanket top-down approach. It was like, we're doing this and it was done. Trying to move to the next incremental change for urban areas, which is essentially 30K, I can't see it being done any other way than bottom up now. And that's through, cycling advocacy, planning, people who are essentially not the road safety experts, telling the story and the reason for change, for survivability for pedestrians and that livability mix that it's going to create. One, good outcomes for road safety, good outcomes for the environment, and good outcomes for business. Do you know what I mean? Like it actually does. When you do that in a regional town, the benefits are profound. So that's, I think, sort of in those particular areas, that's what you're actually going to have to do. We have to move our speed limits settings down in urban areas.
As you say, the narrative is important on that. It's not just the road safety narrative, is it?
That's right. You have to sell it from the other benefits within the community. And when you have great partnerships with planning people, road safety professionals, biggest ally. When you have planning people and road safety people working side by side, you can actually solve lots and lots of problems because they understand the shift in movement and place and people understanding that revolutionized and unlocked a huge amount of potential in road safety because people understand that. If you talk about something like Military Road in Sydney, people get that that's not a place really for people. Maybe we could put that in the show notes too, guys. It's not a place for people. It's a place for traffic. It's a commuter corridor that we need to actually say this is a movement corridor. It can't be both.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because it's, if I was doing a movement on place review, I'd say it's an arterial high street through a lot of, so parts of it are arterial high streets, other parts connector avenues. So, really the place, actually understanding each individual place along the road becomes really important. So going to be a bit controversial, a little to get engineers. So part of this, the safer system is safer infrastructure. Are we over-engineering roads that then encourage people to increase their speed? So from a behavioural and policy perspective.
Well, this is okay. So I don't know how many pieces of correspondence I've written back to people where they say autobahns in Germany are safe and we should increase our speed limit to 130. Thousands and thousands. The problem is, sure, we have well-designed high-speed roads, but the proportion of the network that is so small and that's not where the trauma problem is, right? So my short answer is no. The whole regional road network requires so much safety treatment in terms of infrastructure spend just to bring it up to a standard that will be safe to have 110K speed limit on. That's the fundamental thing. And that's why the move to adopting IRAP in Australia and New Zealand, so OSRAP, and the work that's underway to do that is a really, really critical step, right? For a long time, that wasn't talked about or adopted.
Claire, can you, for the audience that aren't road safety people, can you explain what the RAP stuff is, please?
Organisation, essentially, which uses methodology to star rate roads. So 1 being bad, 5 being good. And there's a whole lot of criteria that moves things up and down the scale, right? So you can do, up until 12 months ago, all of the state network is mapped, state's network, but there was a reluctance to share that data, right? You can imagine why, because it's going to show where investment in infrastructure is needed. There is large proportions of our network with really high volumes of traffic on them that are 2-star roads. Do you know what I mean?
So just to clarify, the star system is around safety of the road, isn't it? It's not yeah. So One of the things I'm always interested in is how you allocate your budget and trade-offs here,
Yeah.
right? Because one of the other ways of improving road safety, which also has significant other benefits as well. So when we're talking about investments in infrastructure, we often end up with, do we invest in making a road infrastructure safer, or do we invest in getting people out of cars by investing in that stuff in public transport instead?
Build more roads, and you're just going to get more cars on the road, right? And I think as I would say most jurisdictions in Australia have built their way out of, they think that they're building their way out of a road safety problem. I don't think we're spending enough effort and time truly on mode shift. We haven't in the past, and I think we should. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't think of many genuine collaborative partnerships where road safety people were putting that in their road safety strategies in my time, which you may find surprising, but that's sort of the truth. But yes, absolutely. And I mean, it would be interesting to look. I haven't seen the evaluations coming out of Queensland yet about their 50-cent travel fares, but what impact is that going to have on their road toll?
Given that it hasn't reduced car use at all, or pretty much zero, I'd be gobsmacked if it had improved road safety. What it has done is it has increased the amount of people use public transport, but these were people who walked, cycled, or used public transport already. They weren't people coming out of their cars. So yeah, it's not good for inducing mode shift, unfortunately, at least away from cars.
Whereas the doubling in fuel prices will lead to around 20% shift to other modes.
That's all other things being equal. But if we actually use the opportunity to improve the other alternatives as well by providing dedicated bus lanes and dedicated cycle lanes, maybe that 20% could be the lower end of the spectrum.
Well, this is where behavioural change programs are really important, because you need that stickiness. So behavioural change campaigns are a very large part of road safety. So I see the segue there, Russell.
Very good.
Yeah.
Seamless.
Yes, I've just ruined it. So, Claire, do you want to talk about how behavioural change campaigns work, particularly at a local level, with in New South Wales, and I'm sure other jurisdictions as well, the local government road safety programs?
Yeah, sure. Look, I didn't tell people this for a long time in my career. Now I just own it. I actually started my career as a road safety officer, would you believe, in a local government area. I was, 12. No, I wasn't. I'd just finished uni. But it was very much education focused. That was essentially my job. And your job also was to write a road safety action plan. If I had my time again, though, yes, behaviour change is important at the local level. But for me, where I see local government would really benefit from investing is actually funding to deal with the massive infrastructure problem that they have. Do you know what I mean? Yes, I get that at a community level, you want to be talking to them about building the community narrative and the need for road safety reform. But doing the education at a local level, I would say you're better off to give local government genuine funding to fix their infrastructure program than to spend your time doing a lot of road safety education. Controversial.
Yeah. Oh, no. Good.
It's great.
That's just our podcast in general.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think that's what you're saying, though, is not like this is your opinion. It's actually quite strongly evidence-based as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? There is a lot of evidence that behavioural change and that sort of educational stuff is not very effective.
Yes. No. Like, that's where I sort of, it serves its purpose, but it's not going to be the needle shifting.
No, it makes everybody feel warm and fluffy, like I'm doing something.
Yeah.
Right? But actually, it's nowhere near the most effective thing that you can do. And if anything, it's a distraction.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things.
I was going to say, I think I've got a counter example. And Claire, this is, where it'd be interesting to hear from your expertise. The involvement of the Council for Road Safety Officers and with the liquor records in providing alternate modes of transport for people who've consumed too much alcohol, as a result, unsafe to drive. When I was coming up in the system, like you, I was only 12 at the time. The road safety program and the liquor records would fund late night buses,
Yes.
in order to get people home after a night of drinking, so that they weren't tempted to drive. Now, maybe that doesn't have as much value with the rise of ride-hailing services.
Yep.
But certainly when I was young, it was an important factor in a group's decision-making about going out.
Yeah, look, yes, and they still exist, in areas. But I would say too, it's the responsibility of the licensed venue to get their patrons home safely as well. Like, we could actually say there is an opportunity for government to say, if you have this particular size of venue and you're in a regional area, you need to provide a community, like what do we call them? A community bus, essentially, for people to pick and drop off passengers. Like, they work exceptionally well in regional areas. Why, as a government, if we have a defined amount of money to spend on road safety, it's not limitless, I would not be investing my money there. I would be investing it in other things related to drink driving. So police enforcement, mandatory alcohol interlocks for mid-range drink drivers, lowering BAC limits. Like, the BAC limit for heavy vehicle drivers in New South Wales, I was only just looking at this, is still 0.02. Why? Like, why are we allowing that? In the ACT, it's not. But the role of education is an enabler. It's not the thing that's going to shift the needle. Do you know what I mean? And if I can just controversially talk about speed cameras here for a moment, not controversially, but like,
well, they are very controversial in a lot of places,
they are controversial, right? And all the jurisdictions have different policy settings around speed cameras, but I've spent a huge amount of my career working on speed camera enforcement, and particularly mobile speed cameras. That is the single biggest thing that many jurisdictions could do, is to remove warning sign from mobile speed cameras. You could have, put a list of links on a website somewhere, but that general deterrence for speeding, by removing the predictability of enforcement across the network. And this has been modelled. Publish reports on this for particular jurisdictions. It would save, in places like New South Wales in Australia, 40 to 60 lives a year.
So, Claire, New South Wales tried removing the signposts.
Yes.
Okay. And there was at least a newspaper backlash, if not a community backlash. And there was at least a vocal part of the community was very, very anti. And so it ended up in a reversal. I'm interested in, what do you think, what would you do differently if you were doing it again, right? Having been through that process, was it just, well, the minister needed to sort of, toughen up and deal with the grief? Or do you think that we should have perhaps implemented in a kind of more, got to the same end point, but did it in a much more, going back to your point about pilots and slow, and getting there at the end is more important in a sense than rushing to the end game. I mean, what would you have been your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. Look, it's all also about context at the time. There was, when that decision was made, there was a minister who was very, very compelled to do things if he had solid evidence to do them. Do you know what I mean? So if there was evidence that he knew, scientific evidence to prove something, and, this is after building a lot of trust between the bureaucracy and elected officials. It was like, well, what else can we do? So the evidence was there. Yes, there were things in terms of, I wouldn't call them implementation failure, but you had the political will. That particular person moved on, and they were carrying a lot of the public-facing "I'll ride the storm" out, and probably the rollout took potentially longer than it could have. So typically what happens, you take the signs off, you'll get a big peak in infringements, and then people will adapt their behaviour quickly. There was more at play then. We did probably too much too quickly in terms of size and scale, and I've worked recently with the New Zealand Transport Agency they've transferred their speed camera program from the police over to the transport agency. And they were really, really strategic about not doing things doing too much all at once. Do you know what I mean? And I was saying to them, make sure that you really give the authorising environment in the community, but also do it and not gradually. I mean, like you could go from, say, and theirs aren't signposted, so there's one thing, but say you want to increase the amount of enforcement you do, the number of hours to get alignment with other jurisdictions, right? If you know that you're going to save 20 to 30 lives by doing that, well, then do 1.5 times your current program and let people sort of deal with it and adjust their behaviour. And then in 2 or 3 years, do the next tranche. Do you know what I mean? So do things in scales rather than go, we've got a political opportunity here, we're going to go for broke, and then you lose the whole thing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an example of implementation failure where I think it's really, really difficult policy reforms to navigate.
So Claire, just on that implementation point, we talked about local government and the need to significantly improve the safety of their roads.
Yeah.
How good are councils at the moment in terms of their capability for when they design roads for making sure that they are, if they're doing a road anyway, you'd hope that it would be, turned into a 5-star road, whatever, regardless of what it was before, right? So how good are they at doing that in their design?
Well, I don't want this to be like the sound bites for the podcast. There is a lot of amazing, capable, talented people in local government across Australia. Like some of the best road safety leaders I know, advocates I know, work in local government any day of the week, I would say that. But I think that there's a huge opportunity to build not only the capability, but the capacity of local government to do things. And I think leaving it, because in some councils, you've got one traffic engineer, potentially not a road safety officer, and the planning people might not speak to the traffic engineer. There's a huge amount of work that needs to be done in building the capability and capacity for local government. And I think really their biggest barrier is investment, is funding. It's actually funding for them.
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys think, but I think
Yeah.
that's what I see as their biggest blocker.
Well, I know from a lot of regional councils, they don't just have one traffic engineer. They have one traffic / stormwater / road / maintenance engineer.
Correct.
Their engineering teams can actually be very small.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's only when you get let's say 50 to 100,000 population that you actually get somebody whose job is focused around traffic and safety.
Yeah, and this is where, saying things like doing a local government road safety strategy or an action plan, sure, that's important, but there's 1,000 strategies and glossy documents that sit on shelves that justify a means to an end for government across a whole range of things. You guys are like, yes, we've all seen them. Something like dedicated funding and capacity and ability to do network safety plans, I would say to a local government would be a far better use of your time than jumping to a road safety strategy as your first step. I think a network safety plan gives people, it's kind of like the building blocks, right, to get to where you need to. It actually goes, well, here's the problem with your network. Use OSRAP funding to understand what's happening on your road network. You've got a mountain of crash data there. And then have an investment strategy for your network safety plan, and then sort of move to the what I would call the other pillars of the safe system. But your road and speed pillar in local governments are really the levers that you want to be pulling.
Claire, can I talk about a couple of things that are sort of evolving in the road safety space?
Yeah.
That's highly topical at the moment. So the growth on our roads of bigger cars, so the growth of SUVs as a proportion of the fleet. What's your thinking around road safety and SUVs at the moment?
I think it's one that I'd group them all I'd group SUVs, e-bikes, and medicinal cannabis, sadly, as like 3 road safety areas that I think, I don't want to say the horse has bolted, but I think we've had a lot of missed opportunity to do things in, and we've taken too long to quickly respond to something than actually maybe not doing something perfectly right and then sort of adjusting it back. So Queensland with e-bikes is a classic example where it's the horse has bolted and now they're trying to wind things back. I think the same with SUVs, like pedestrian deaths across Australia are absolutely like outrageous. It is down to
Yeah.
like
So I just
SUVs.
reviewed. So London last week published its Vision Zero implementation plan part 2. So it did its original one, I think 2018 or 2019, and it's just done its part 2. And it flagged SUVs as a significant problem on London's roads. And it
Yep.
had a really horrible statistic, which was that SUVs are 209% more likely to kill a child under 9 than a
Yeah.
non-SUV car, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's just a horrific statistic. And I think even for under 18s, it was over 70% more likely to kill them than a car. In London's case, one of the things I think was interesting was they didn't know what to do. It's quite clear.
Yeah.
They're kind of like, we don't have the levers, because a lot of those levers sit at a national level,
Yeah.
to try and deal with it. But we're seeing some attempts to deal with the SUVs, but not necessarily from the safety perspective. So I saw that some places are looking to charge them more for parking because they take up more space, is the rationale, to try and disincentivize them. But, those things are sort of controversial because so many
Yeah.
people have got SUVs now, right? So
Yeah.
it's very hard.
Yeah, and very hard to separate SUVs from large vans. In that regard, it's interesting. Like, in a way, of the countries that are being invaded by trucks. Let's just call them what they are.
Yeah.
They're trucks.
I'm thinking of a Ram, those ridiculous
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what came into my mind. Yep.
Yeah. I don't have the stats, but they're the automobile insurers in America.
Yeah.
Very interesting to see if the rates that they're charging for SUVs is escalating with the relative amount of damage that they cause to other vehicles, and the injuries they cause to their occupants and pedestrians and bicycle riders.
Are you talking insurance premiums and things like that?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, there are government levers. You could increase the registration fees for SUVs. Like, that's a government lever right there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, you can pull that lever if you want. Yeah, it's actually the SUV issue is, I think, one of the, and you're seeing it sort of play out. Australia is going to follow the curve of America in terms of SUV uptake, but also pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries as a result of the fleet changing.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I think is interesting, lessons learned from the 1970s, was the oil crisis did actually lead to a reduction in car size over a period, even in America. But this time, I think there'll be I think it'll more likely incentivize a switch to electric vehicles.
Yeah.
So the vehicles may stay just as big, probably heavier if they're electric vehicles.
Yeah. Yes.
And they're, and still have those big impacts. So I'm not as hopeful that we'll see a shift to smaller cars as a consequence of the fuel crisis that we're going through.
Yeah.
There's an increasing number of small electric vehicles, but most electric cars are, what we call the mid-size.
Yeah.
It's a crossover vehicle. So your Tesla Model Y, your BYD Sea Line, and other brands are available.
Yeah.
But they're still, they're in the traditional SUV small crossover category. Certainly in the Australian context, there are no large electric utes or trucks for, that would be used for domestic reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, it's where we're going to put the onus on car manufacturers. Like, we don't have, car manufacturers here, but in Australia, just qualifying. When are we going to get this shift to the promotion of vehicles because of their safety features rather than how big they are or whether or not they make you look tough or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like, when are we actually going to start to engage really on that sort of issue? Because we have the ANCAP safety ratings for vehicles. Like I always say, I don't know how much you guys know. You guys would know about star rating vehicles. Yes, thank God. Like
Yes,
lots of people don't.
I have criticised them for because the NCAP ratings for me don't properly take into account the SUV safety problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So for me, that's one of our flaws.
Yeah.
Over several decades, we have allowed these vehicles to become dominant on our roads, despite a whole bunch of regulations that we put in around what car safety features need to be in. But it's kind of like, but apart from this elephant in the room where we're making cars much less safe, that's fine. We'll allow that. But all these other things that, we're doing, we'll just ignore it. It just doesn't make sense. I don't think we've done ourselves proud in that. I think we've taken our eye off the ball in the design of vehicles and making sure that they are inherently safe and allowed on our roads. And, now we have the problem of trying to wind that back, which is very challenging.
Yeah. I mean, you also, though, like people I don't know if you could get people from the ANCAP board on your podcast, but like there's some very, very talented people who work on the ANCAP board, and I'm sure would be willing to talk to your listeners about sort of how things have progressed and where they're potentially going. But, as an actual system, I do think we need to start looking at. This is where I believe maybe, Graham, that behaviour change works. If we could be promoting or working with vehicle manufacturers to push the safety ratings of their vehicles rather than other features that are selling their vehicles, I think that would be a really great.
There's lots of levers we can pull. Pricing is one of them as well. You talked about it. But you could easily say, we won't allow a car, if you had a proper rating system that really worked well on terms of SUVs, and you could just say your vehicle has to meet a minimum standard, which is effectively what we do. We're just going to raise that standard. Okay. So you won't get away unless you're less, say, rated as, level 4 or something on the rating. You won't be allowed on our roads anymore. You could do those sorts of things. So the manufacturers kind of have to comply. I mean, you'd think that without any manufacturing, it would be an advantage, right? There's nobody lobbying saying, oh, you're going to put us out of business and we're going to lose hundreds of thousands of jobs on manufacturing because we have no car manufacturers anymore. You'd have thought it would be easier than it was, but it doesn't seem to be. I'm conscious of time. Yeah. So I'm very conscious of time. And one of the things, the only thing we haven't really touched on, which is a great white hope for lots of people in the road safety space, not necessarily experts in the road safety space, but I think people who just go, people who like to like cars and just think they need to be a little bit safer. Their magic bullet is autonomous vehicles. These things are going to be safer on our roads, and everything is going to be great. How do you think about autonomous vehicles and road safety? What's your perspective?
Look, in 5 to 10 years' time, autonomous vehicles will have a much larger proportion of the fleet. It would have been done for a whole lot of reasons, potentially not road safety related, like the market's going to decide. My thing is, why wait for that to happen when there's existing countermeasures that we know work now? Why not focus your effort there rather than waiting for autonomous vehicles to solve the problem in 5 years?
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things for me in AVs in the road safety space, going back to your point about speeds and the difficulty of getting people to sort of slow down, needing to slow speeds down.
Yeah.
We could easily legislate for AVs to have more restricted speeds.
Yep.
On roads, as a default, rather than that default 50, we could make AVs. Sorry, you're going to have to be default 30 in these places, even if the official speed limit is 50. For an AV, it's 30, and as they roll out and become a larger and larger part of the fleet, they would automatically be doing 30. And the other thing is, then they're of course slowing down everybody else as well.
You know what? This is the thing. This is like going, let's fix something new rather than our existing problem. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like we haven't even got our existing issue of like getting 50 to 30 in urban limits done. So we're kind of going, let's use this thing to try and fix a problem that we actually need to fix for everyone. I don't know. That's me being controversial back at you.
No, I think it's a really good point. I think, autonomous vehicles are not going to be, a major part of our fleet for
No.
a long time.
No, unless the
Right?
fuel crisis continues and everyone buys AVs in the next 2 weeks.
Well, you can't even buy an AV right now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there isn't anything that is,
Yeah.
an AV that you can buy. So even then we'd have to wait for sort of a Waymo or,
Yeah.
one of the other AV companies to get onto our streets. And even then that will take, they're only a small proportion of the fleet, even in the places they've rolled out already,
Yeah.
right? In places like San Francisco, for example, or parts of China.
Yeah.
I think that's a great spot to end, given that Russell and I have talked a lot about AVs, and I think we'll be talking even more.
We will.
Any last thoughts? Yeah, any last thoughts, Claire, before we wrap up? What didn't we cover that
Look, if
you would have liked us to?
I would just love people to think really, really about the why of what they're doing in road safety and explaining that first before we talk about the what and the how. Do you know what I mean? Like, why are we doing it? How do you really explain to someone why something needs to happen and work back from there? Do you know what I mean? Like the what and the how, we know pretty much. But it's the why that I think is holding road safety back currently. And I think if we spent more time as practitioners and decision makers across the sort of the spectrum, thinking about the why of what we're doing for every single countermeasure and really fleshing that out, I think that we would be in a better spot to be able to influence and take action.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. That's been really insightful. Claire is actually our first guest on the podcast, so if we think we should have more, or even Claire back again. So I'm sure you can talk about other things, not just road safety.
Sure can.
Let us know in the comments, and if you're feeling generous, help us make this a better podcast by dropping us $1 on YouTube or Patreon. Thank you once again, Russell. A pleasure as always.
Thank you, Graham, and thank you, Claire, for being such a fantastic guest.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Claire.
Thanks so much for having me.